We're go.
Okay. All right. We're going to get things started now. Thank you all for coming. I see a couple of new faces here tonight and some returning people, so thank you all for coming out. I'm sure Trimble is going to be a very popular topic apparently. So we're going to get started with our traditional things here for our February meeting. It might have to be able to, oh, yeah. Give me 1 second.
Here, I thought you were reusing slides from December.
And all right, we're going to talk about what's new. So first up is about the new Office 2016 update that came out earlier this week. We're going to talk about the Sparkle vulnerability. If you don't know what that is, well, we'll be talking about that as well. The Adobe Creative Cloud Desktop issue. For iOS, the Error 53 and the Unix Epoch issues. And the Mac Apple Store certificate expiration issue. And finally, we'll be talking about the big elephant in the room. So, Office 2016 updates. 15.19.1 was released earlier this week. There was apparently an issue with the CDN cache, which means why it didn't drop on Tuesday, but dropped yesterday instead. So, but it's the latest update. There's some stability fixes and maybe, but I don't think any new features that I know off the top of my head. Also for 2011, for those of you on 2011, 14.6.1 was updated. So your auto packager feeds, if you have them, should have already gotten the new versions. If you don't have that, you should probably get that because it'll make your life easier. But anyway. As of the 15.20 release, they'll have a new version of the volume license serializer for you volume license customers, which also means that if any of you are basically replacing the licensing key list or just dropping it in, that won't work anymore for validating the license. So if you're a volume license customer, make sure you get the new serializer, as that will reduce the amount of headaches you have trying to license Office 2016. It also means you can download the SKU list or the O365 version of the Office apps and just run the VL serializer, and it'll make it the enterprise version or your volume license version. So we'll talk more about that when that comes out, and that'll be next month, since Microsoft is working on point updates every month. So. And talking about next, the Sparkle vulnerability. So Sparkle is an auto update mechanism used by a lot of third-party apps, and specifically, just basically you set up an XML file on the website, and in the the XML file I think is either on the website or it's on the client locally. That the client points to, it reads, sees if a new version is up there, and then prompts you and say, hey, there's a new version. And then people just download it automatically. Lots and lots of apps use this. Things like Evernote,
Sketch, right?
Sketch. A lot of the Mac App Store apps use it. So the vulnerability is in versions prior to Sparkle 1.13.1. And it basically allows for man-in-the-middle attacks, for someone to essentially insert malicious website into the Sparkle feed, and then instead of going to where you think you're going to get updates, you could be downloading something malicious from somewhere else. So the fix for the vendors is to update their app with the current version of Sparkle, which is 1.13.1. the issue with that is that means they have to update the app itself. And if it's from the Mac App Store, that means they have to submit another app and go through the approval process. So that may take a while. Also, depending on the developers and their cycles, it may be an additional amount of time for them to get an update ready because they may not have the resources to update the app just for Sparkle. The other way the vendor could mitigate it without actually updating the app is, I think, you could change change the type of URL that's in there. So instead of using HTTP, which a lot of vendors have been doing, you use HTTPS, and that will mitigate the man in the middle of the book, at least until the short term where they can update it. So Ben Toms, Mac Mule, has made an EA for Jamf users to go and detect any vulnerable third-party apps. So if you're using Casper, you can go to his site and get the EA and just plug it in, and it'll give you a list of vulnerable apps. And our friend Alistair, our good friend Alistair, made Extinguish, which will create a profile that you can apply, which will basically turn off the auto-update function. And it actually rewrites the feed URL to 127.0.0.1. So it basically disables auto-update. And you can make a config profile and then push that out with whatever management system you're using. So, at least until, but using Extinguish means that you have to manually update the app when they have a fix available at that point. But if you're managing updates already, it's not a big burden. So,
do you know if Alistair has tested that across a lot of apps? Because trying to manage those settings with MCX in the past, I know a lot of apps didn't honor
right.
the changes.
I don't know off the top of my head. That may be a question for Alistair. If Alistair is listening, maybe he can chime in on Slack, maybe. So unless someone wants to summon him on Slack and ask that question.
His README says that you should be testing because it won't be enough for a lot of apps.
Okay. So there's Rick. So yes, for more information, grab the slide deck. Those are links to the sites there, the sources for that. So, so Adobe. Adobe introduced on their latest version of the Creative Cloud desktop. For those of you who use Adobe Creative Cloud, there was a bug that would delete data. So, which is yes, it's not a small thing right there. Essentially, what the bug would do is that there was something in the update that would try to delete the alphabetically first folder in the user's home folder. I don't know why, but it tried to do that. And that one, but alphabetically first doesn't mean it starts with A, as you may know, but it starts anything that has a leading period or a leading underscore or or space in the name would count as being alphabetically first. And this issue arose because the Backblaze Backblaze folks have a folder that they write to in the user home folder .Backblaze something BLK BZ vol, which I guess stores metadata for their backup solution. And that was getting erased when the update ran. So, and then lots of Backblaze customers complained about losing data, and then they figured out it was Adobe, and they reached out to Adobe and say, hey, your update is doing this. And then, the version of Creative Cloud Desktop affected is 3.5.0.26. Adobe pulled it immediately after it was proven that that was the issue. And they released 2.09, I think, very shortly afterwards to fix that. So I don't know if anybody here was affected, but it was certainly talked about a lot. So that was a big whoops from Adobe. So and sources if you want to read more there. So. Okay, now error 53. So this is one of the two little snafus on iOS that have come out recently. This one affects the iPhone 6 and 6 Plus specifically, and it's related to Touch ID and the Touch ID sensor itself. The error 53 arises because it's essentially a check to make sure that the Touch ID sensor is actually working properly. But I don't think Apple meant it to be in the final shipping version of the OS. I'm not entirely sure on that. If anyone wants to chime in and they know better, they can go ahead.
The error 53 is if the secure enclave or anything in the path of the secure enclave between the home button and the enclave is no longer approved by Apple.
Okay.
So if you replace it with another part, but it's not using the approved Apple mechanism for doing that, it throws up error 53 and effectively bricks the device because it can no longer trust the secure enclave.
Right. So effectively, this happens when an iPhone is repaired by a third party, usually not authorized by Apple. So, Apple has released a new build of OS 9.2.1 specifically to address this. And it's only available if you updated through iTunes. So I'm sure probably over the air people will be addressed later, the later date. And yeah. So, and the other iOS iPhone error is the Unix epoch error, which I'm sure people have heard about a lot as well. Especially now that there is a class action suit pending. This affects any 64-bit iOS devices. So yeah, iPhone 5S and newer, iPad Air or newer, iPad Mini 2 or newer, and the 6th generation iPod Touch or newer, which is quite a lot. So basically what happens is you go in and configure the date and time to the beginning of the Unix epoch era, which is 1/1/1970. Then when you reboot the machine, it gets stuck reboot the device, it gets stuck in a boot mode. It won't go past the Apple logo. So at this time, it requires you actually having physical access to the device to do that. But it is possible, theoretically, to set up a malicious NTP server that could reset the date to 1/1/1970. So you can't fix it by just doing a factory reset. So far, most people have been able to fix this by letting the battery discharge, letting it reset itself, and then reset the date and time to something a little bit not 1/1/1970, and then it's able to boot. So Apple has said they will fix it, but hasn't said that. So maybe in the next update, or maybe in the later update. That's something to be aware of there. Next, so this is the Mac App Store certificate issue. So this may or may not be something that affects everybody. Specifically, one of the certs that Apple uses on apps recently expired. If you are doing things like downloading Apple apps and archiving them or repackaging them because you don't allow access to the Mac App Store, then this might affect you because some of the apps that you may have downloaded the signing cert may have expired, which means the system won't let you install it or warn you saying, hey, this is you probably don't want to install this. So it's recommended that if you're going to do that, to re-download the installer with the newer certificate and replace the one that you're using. So there is a workaround for you to install using turning off the signing function, but that's not recommended. But if you wanted to, you can go to Richard's blog, where he's documented this, and look at both. Look at the way to using its current install with the bad certificate. So, but again, that's not recommended. And finally, we have what everybody's actually been talking about everywhere. And the basic question that it boils down to is, should the government be able to compel Apple to create a tool to hack their own devices to get at the data inside for investigative purposes? So the interesting thing to me about Apple's letter is that it's basically worded to imply that it's not a technical barrier, and that it's possible to do what the government is ordering them to do. It's a question of whether or not they should, and the Pandora's box get opens if they do. So, does anybody not know what the background is here? So we're all pretty good. So yeah, so we all know what's at stake in this case. So, so specifically, I know the FBI wants them to help bypass several safeguards that are already in there, so they can use their forensics tools to get at the information inside. Specifically, they want to be able to turn off the passcode delay that happens once you start entering bad passwords, and also the auto wipe that happens automatically after 10 attempts. So that's those two are probably the biggest roadblocks to what the FBI wants to do. In addition to the fact that that without knowing the password, these two, well, actually, I should say the two roadblocks here are the first big hurdle. They can get past that and get something where they don't actually have to physically punch in a passcode. They can probably do a brute force to figure out and break the encryption and figure out figure out the password. So, in addition to other things that they would want to be able to do. From a legal standpoint, this is very potentially precedent-setting, and I'm probably not going to surprise anyone by saying this will probably end up in the Supreme Court. So it's one of those things that now actually makes the coming election ever more so important. So, and if you want more details about that, the Ars Technica and Vice sources here go into that specifically. So, but yeah, so that's what's new, and we'll take it over from here. Now we're going to have our special guest, Andrew Farabend, talk to us about the magic and mystery of the terminal. So, all right.
Thanks, Serge.
Yep.
Hello, everyone.
Hello. I think that's there.
That might be the end.
Yeah, that's it. You have to stretch a little.
Okay, all good. So, let's talk about the shell, huh? So the shell and the command line are largely the same thing. We could approach them from the same perspective. One of these buttons gets this full screen. That one. Great. So, my name is Andrew Feierabend. I was an English major, so I did not natively come to understand this from my education. I just read some stuff online. I spent 5 years working in the basement of Springboard Media with many of these fine gentlemen, and I now work in an office with a lot of people. Good time. I'm not dev there. I run a Linux research cluster of a bunch of Red Hat systems, and so therefore most of my job entails scripting. Lots and lots of spending time in command line, doing writing programs or working with systems directly through the command line. So I do this a lot, and I found some tricks and interesting things that have helped me. So goal. It's really casual. I like talking about this stuff, and I like this stuff. I'd love to talk more about it. If you have a question, raise your hand and let's discuss something. I know a lot of you are familiar with this already, and a lot of you are not. But the majority of that, so it's 33%, 33%, and 50% together, to say that a lot of you are in the middle Some of this will be very interesting, some of this will be very boring. So I'm going to go through it fast. The slide deck will be available for everyone. Read through it, take a look at it afterwards, ask me questions afterwards, ask me questions in between. It's, again, really important. So, the shell. I'll be using Bash, which is what I recommend everybody use if you have an option. Previous shells were the C shell, for example, TCSH. It's not recommended that you use that in this day and age. We are in the 21st century. So I'm trying to use something standards like Bash. I'm doing all of this on a 10.11.3 machine. Hey, Chad. There will be a couple instances where I screenshot where I've remoted into a Linux machine. It will look largely the same. The prompt will differ, pointed out. But everything that you'll, most of the things you'll see will be on my 10.11.3 machine. I use some standards. Fixed with font indicates a command you can type on your command line. I have bolded concepts. Lowercase, right? Probably all familiar with this. If you're working on the command line, case. OS 10 is not a case sensitive file system. HFS plus. You can install it that way. Has anyone ever? Cool. So that means you can interact with files via either case insensitivity, so your preference. But most of the commands will revert to lowercase. So for the ease of basically all your command line exercises, stick to lowercase, unless you know you should be doing otherwise. So, what's a shell? Shell, command line, doing a shell game here, moving things around. Shell is a command language interpreter. So it's essentially a whole collection of programs that are collected into Bash, or TCSH, or C shell, or KSH, or CSH, or whatever shell you want to use. It's a bunch of stuff to make your life on the command line easier. Things like shortcuts, predefined variables in the environment, basically a lot of things to make what you do every day on the command line a lot easier than it would have otherwise been had it not existed. You guys are all Mac users, so there's term. Like that utilities. I'll show you iTurn2, which I recommend instead. But you can really use either. The functionality would be identical between two because they are accessing the same computer, either my laptop or remote server. It's just how it presents the prompt, the various programs. But it has some cool features which I'll touch on that I think are indispensable. Why do you care about shell scripting? I think most of you got that already. It's remote management, automated execution, beyond automator, troubleshooting of systems with graphical problems. So you get that. You can totally probably put something that has a graphics issue if you can get right at the command line and check it out. And a lot of things are faster. I promise. I'll show you some of them. Clicking through a whole bunch of windows to do something, sometimes very easily accomplished in one line. I do not have enough time in my day to spend the time clicking to do the things I need to do. So this makes it a lot easier. So, the prompt. Oh, it's full screen. I'm still getting used to the new features of full screen. You see the prompt on the left-hand side? Okay. So the prompt. Even now, I launched iTurn2. That was that program we talked about. I think I'm actually going to leave it like this rather than go full screen. So I can move back. Prompt. Shows me a little bit of information about my environment, where I'm sitting, some things I might need to reference along there. But it's essentially, this bit is printed onto the terminal or command line. And this bit allows me to start typing. A little white box is my cursor. In iTurn2, you can set your cursor wherever you like, or a couple of options. But essentially, this tells me that the computer, or the shell really, is ready for my input. It's ready to take whatever I have to ask it to do and run it. Like I said, basic information. It is highly customizable. I will show you that. There are config files pertinent to the shell you're using. Bash has its own in your home directory, where you can set some cool things, which I'll put down. Okay, so here I had entered one command. And you guys can raise your hands at it. I entered pwd, which is print working directory. It tells me precisely where I am. Well, I'm probably in the way of something. Sorry. So I've searched those. It's everywhere. So you see the output is printed on the next line underneath it. I put a command up here next to the $sign. output, and then I am returned another prompt telling me that the shell is ready for my next question. Essentially, just question, answer, and then it's ready for my next question. And that's what I've said here. So if I was to type in a command that did not have output, I gave it something, and the shell said, yeah, I don't have what you're looking for. It would give me a prompt like here without any output in between. Return me directly to my next prompt here. As you saw, when I just pressed return a whole bunch of times, like so. I could also do something like this. Yeah, that'll work. No, it's obviously not a directory. So let's say I'm looking through my dash history, which may actually have that. Cool. So what I've just done here is, I'll tell you what greph like. But I've given it a command saying, I'd like you to search through this particular file for this exact phrase. Doesn't exist. How is that possible? I typed that yesterday. No, but it doesn't exist, so it returns me right back to the prompt. It's ready for my next command. So here's a little bit more interesting stuff. ls is a command that asks me to list the contents of a directory. If you're from a Windows background, that's dir. If you love your DOS, good time with that. I'm giving it a command with two flags, the L and the A flag. I'm then piping it via this little pipe key, which is just below your delete key if you hold shift. Very, very useful. Into another command, head. Both ls and head are commands. I'll tell you how to find them later, but essentially I'm using two commands here. The first most has two flags, set. The latter-most has one. I'm taking the output of the first one, which is ls, shoving it over to head, which takes that output as its input, and then works on it and gives me this response final. So what I'm actually doing, listing the directory and the contents of that directory, giving it two flags. L asks for the long format, so it gives me this whole line per entry instead of just that dot, double dot, this, whatever it is, CF user, oh, Cold Fusion. And DS store, which I'm sure you guys have seen lots of. So that's the long version there. The pipe then takes that output, which would actually be pretty long because I'm sitting in my home directory. I'll show you in a second. And I've got lots of files in there. Perhaps you guys are familiar with folders like library, music, and movies. Those should all be in this list. Instead, I'm piping it to head, which gives me the first some lines of the previous command sent to it. I'm actually specifying here I only want 5 lines. That's in head, that's what -5 means. So indeed, it prints only the first 5 lines of the output of ls. So it would normally give me this whole line. But I instead type it to head, which by default gives me, I guess, that many. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, or so. But I only wanted 5, so that changes slightly how head functions. Okay. Cool. So here, I'm using a command again, head, but I'm giving head a file to give me the first few lines of instead. Rather than saying, I got this information first, I'm then passing it to head via pipe. Head is now acting directly on this file, text_file.txt on my desktop. Does everyone know what that tilde means that precedes desktop? Is that new to anyone? Love to talk about it. All right, so we've all seen that before. So here we are at the file on my desktop, which happens to have this exact text. I typed that in there because I am funny. Down here, we have a similar sort of thing. What's different about this one? I have 2 different files. I promise they are not the same. You can tell because they have different contents, don't they? They're slightly different. It's different.
One has a space.
So what did I have to do right before the space to get the shell to even see the file in the first place? Backslash. Which way are you looking? Backslash is an escape character, which tells the shell not to process the very next character as it normally would. So I'll talk to you today. That's a lot more stuff coming there. But essentially, I had to do that to get the shell to read that space as a space and not as the next command. If I had omitted that, it would have tried to head the file on the desktop text and the file in my current working directory, file.txt. There's no such file. Cool. Oh, so these paths are arguments to the previous command. I'm passing this argument, which is a file path, to the command head. So we saw some interesting things about commands. They are commands, flags, arguments, and then pipes and things like that. Pipes don't really fit into this list. So you will frequently see a command followed by a hyphen and then various flags changing how the command functions. You may choose to type it into something, but really the most common is right here, command flags argument. You could say something like ls-la tilde, with spaces in between each of those 3 steps, 1 step, 2 step, 3 step. Those spaces indicate something different, moving from a command to a flag argument.
So when would you want to use a pipe?
Excellent question. All the time. All of the time, because most of the commands out there don't do exactly what you want to do. Pipe it to another command that slightly changes that output, and now you have precisely what you want. Very common usage of that is if you are trying to get a particular format, say you have a tool from a vendor that reads information in, expected in a very set format, but your log file doesn't really put it that way because it's amalgamating log entries from 6 different systems, all disparate vendors. You can put a little command in place that says, print this, slightly change it. So I might use a command like awk to do that, put that up, and then output it over here. I would want to do that type to awk so that I can change it how I want because the first command is not capable of doing exactly that. I'll have a better example. So these are some very common commands. rsync, cp, rm, are we all familiar with it? rsync is a transfer program, incredibly useful. cp copies locally on system, and rm deletes things. Yeah, you've seen that one before, right? That one. So you see how I've appended flags together rather than -n, -a, -v to tell rsync that I wanted to do dry run of archive and verbosely. I can string them together. Most commands support truncating all of your flags together rather than taking them. A couple that don't like that. You also notice in CP, I use a capital R here. So some flags are capitalized. The way to take a look at it is to read up on program, and I'll show you how to do that. Programs can specify whatever flags they like, whatever parameters. Basically, they tell you how they want you to type. And I'll show that in a moment. In fact, I think I pointed out the man page. No, I don't.
Yes.
I do. Great. Great. I point out that -L, -L, and -A, and -LA, same. Very same thing. So here's me getting carried away with lots of things, using a pipe in much the way I was just describing. But this is a bit much, huh? So what am I doing? Oh, great. Looking through my home directory, printing everything out. I only want things that have capital H and capital I right next to each other. I'm printing the 9th column in that output. I'm then outputting it to a file on my desktop. I'm then telling the prompt in the same line to also read that file back to me, and then also print out the file listing. So it does. It finds this one file and all of my desktop files. Not desktop, user, this is my user directory. And then it lists it for me here. So I'm actually, this is 5 commands altogether. There's 1 output redirect, which I'll talk about, and 3 different methods of chaining, one being pipe, one being semicolon, one being a double line sign. So you do crazy things, a bit much for right now. But that's what you can do. It's pretty cool. Yeah, so here's where we're at. That's a lot of stuff. Let's talk about it. How do I know what I'm typing? It's an awful lot of stuff, especially if I'm just getting started. Where did I learn all these commands? How do I use this in my daily job? That's a lot of text that I just don't remember. I don't remember it either. That's what I'm trying to tell you here. So there are tools here to help you find the command you need to accomplish a given task. Man is really the one we're all talking about. You're probably all thinking of it before. Man, whatever command. Man ls, to take a look at it, for example, we'll do that. And it's a nice formatted list. Introduction gives me a series of flags that are available for my use, etc. You've all been here before. Okay, great. Cool. But a colon is apropos, which I'll only run that real quick. Say you want to do something with networking. That's a really terrible example. Here are all the man pages that have something to do with networking. Say I wanted specifically to do NTP. We just talked about that. Good. So here are a whole bunch of interesting NTP programs that are installed on my machine that have man pages present in the shared drive. Read through them here. Fantastic. And no, I don't remember any of this. It's all available through man pages. Look at Google, Stack Overflow. All this information is out there. Okay, more basic stuff. Breather. All right. More basic stuff, moving around the file system. Slash represents the root directory. Macintosh HD for all of us with Mac laptops. Mac servers. Any of those still around, guys?
Maybe.
The X serve in your basement. So that's slash. Tilde, of course, is the home directory. Anybody familiar with Unix has done that? Here it's just me moving around the directory a bit. PWD again presents exactly where I'm at, so if I forget. So with this, or desktop, I guess, is pretty indicative. You get some interesting Unix systems, and who knows where you're at just by looking at the prompt. It's always tell you where you're at. Tab completion is why we use shells. Many features. Tab completion allows me to start typing what I want to do. Sometimes the path, sometimes the command itself. The shell will help me figure out what it is I'm trying to do. So I'll give a quick demo of that. This allows me to do things like type cd, type slash, and type things like app. And then simply hit tab to have it finish that up. So that's an example. Let's do this. So let's say I do something like, just trying to guess.
Multiple options?
Yeah, exactly.
Just CD to tilde. Like, you'll get like all the.
Okay, that works. You're totally right there. So what this is I'm seeding the applications. I'm not there yet. I'm still sitting in my home directory. Yes, home directory. And so I started typing applications, and I don't remember what S program I'm looking for. I'm trying to put Spotify. Am I trying to use this Python? Whatever. Trying to put up stickies. I hit tab after typing in capital S, and it gives me everything that matches in that directory to where I started to type. And it'll do that as long as I hit tab. But I can start typing P, and it knows that there are only two options left. The tab completion helps me to find the options to select when I'm trying to find a path. It also helps for programs. If I'm doing something like NSL, it helps me figure out that NS lookup is the entire thing. Now there are limitations to program completions. I'll talk about that in a sec. But this always works. File paths. So I don't ever type out a full file path ever. All path environment later. Okay, so I did actually just talk about that. Great. Yes, and you can tab complete file paths anywhere a file path is expected. Whether that be seeding around the computer or a program that is designed to be fed a file path, such as rep cat. Or any number of those things. Oh, I had a demo already. Oh well, applications is fine. More shell built-ins that make your usage of the shell easier. The up and down arrow keys allow you to see previously entered commands and scroll through them like so. I'm just hitting up, down, up, and down. So this allows me to go back and do this, which is my favorite command, because it produces nothing. But I did not have to type that whole thing again because I just went through the command history that Bash is saving for me. I like how much, I believe it's configurable, and you can clear it. View it via the history command, like so. So here's everything I did. You can see me setting up this and figuring out why it wasn't working. There we go. But this is a list of commands that I've run. You can see I've run 510 commands in my session. So I believe it's all of them. It's per session. A session is that. New. So this window has done an awful lot. Actually, that's not true. I did some of these in other things. So it is per login, I guess. I'm not clear on that. Something
No,
to look up.
it saves it. You can actually configure it so it erases when you log out.
History-C.
Yep. So you can change different things in there to have it either per login, per session, or have it there all the time.
So there's my bash history. It's a file in my user home directory, .bash_history. R does the same thing, but apparently doesn't work. No? But yes, this is where that would be. I could cat this file if I choose.
I think it's actually bash rc.
Bash RC is the profile. We'll talk about that in a second.
Right.
That's where you put things like aliases and your path. This is merely the history. Bash RC is where you configure your history recording erasure.
Yep.
Okay. So that's the up-down arrow tab completion. We talked about history. I just showed. Thank you for that excellent leading question. Control keys. So everybody knows Control C. If you don't, now you do. Control C breaks out of any running application. It is the Control Alt Delete of Windows World. And the Command Option Escape, I still remember on the back. It will break any running process. And you will have running processes because some programs on the command line do not cleanly exit. They're designed to constantly present new information. The most famous of them is, yes, Ping, actually. Good. Ping's an excellent example. I was thinking of Top, which is the same thing. Top actually is quit by Q, but it's similar. Ping is a better example because it's correct. Thank you.
Yes.
Let me show you that. So this is going to go as long as I let it go. I'm just pinging Google's root DNS server. But Control C, you can see it actually prints it right to the output, interrupts this, and Ping is smart. Ping has a trap built in that says, if someone Control C's me, I want to do one last thing before I die. And it prints out those statistics, the summary statistics. Most programs won't do this. You kill them, they die. This program should. Control R. Control R changes my prompt, this little search thing, and I can start searching through previous things. It's actually super useful that I have this still up here, my history file. So let's say I wanted to look for apropos. I typed apropos network and apropos NTP, so it's not sure which one I want, but it starts, goodness, I'm capitals, so I have my caps lock key on. Check that out. Matched only the capital A and P. Lowercase a and p. Nope, not that. Pro. There we go. So it's starting to list entries. I believe I can not do that. Okay. Control. So there's apropos. And it'll run it again by pressing enter. I forget how to search back through it. You can use Command R to introduce that and start searching through various previous entered commands. I forget how it is. I actually use that feature very much. And then Control D. Say I'm in, this is one of our systems over here, and I'm not on that network, so. Woohoo!
You don't have port S42 open your.
No, we do, but something is not allowing me out because I can't even get to my test system. Love that one.
Yeah, like open out.
Oh, and I messed up with one. Port 22 appears closed, so never mind. But I can actually demonstrate that right with this terminal. Pretend that Banana Junior 6000 is a remote system that I have SSH'd into. I completed my work and I'm done with it, which to return to my laptop to do whatever it is I do on my laptop. Control D, in this case, closes that window. If I was logged into another system, it would merely log me out of that system cleanly and return me to my laptop. So Control D you'll probably use a lot. You could also achieve the same functionality by typing login. It's the same thing.
Or exit.
Or exit.
Yeah.
Yes, indeed. Actually, if you start using programming languages like R, it's Q, open, parentheses, close parentheses. Python, it's whatever. Perl, like semicolons. So it's really dependent on your environment and your situation. Command line bash, log out. Absolutely. Oh, and clear. Look at all this junk. Gone. Clear returns me to a nice empty window. Perhaps when I have difficulty focusing because there's so much text on my screen. It doesn't actually get rid of my history. And I can also just scroll back up and there it is. So it's really just to clean things up when you're ready to do something else. Well, your information is still there. Yeah. I don't know about that. I wasn't covered. What do you use Command K for? Yeah, let's go ahead. So text. We all remember that first day when we realized that a computer is nothing but a bunch of text files running an OS and allowing you to do fancy 3D games. I do. So text is an incredibly huge part of being a society. We'll talk about cat and less. So here's my example of a file, test.txt. It's an HTML. That simply prints it, gets standard out to my window here. That's it. There's nothing more to talk about. I don't know why I even typed all that much in gray. Oh, less. That's why less is less. Less is a pager. It gives me the opportunity to move up and down through that text. Say it's a really long, it's a thesis. It's not a one-liner, it's a thesis. I wrote one. It's 30 pages. I would want to use less to read through it. Give me control over how I'm reading it, as if it was a book, rather than, well, here, I'll give you an example. Of a really long text file. I don't know.
You can also use more.
You can.
Less is more.
Recommend. Hold on. There it is, the bomb, folks. I recommend less. It's easier for me. Some people prefer more. It's been around longer. If you've been doing this for a long time, use what's familiar to you.
Yeah, log file.
Yeah, thank you. Okay, so cat system.log, right? That's a lot of scrolling up. I don't feel like doing that. It's all the same log file, right? Yeah, I'm done with that. So less. Okay, so this gives me the very first line of that file. Puts me right up here. Now you all know my Gmail. Great. It allows me to use keys, up and down arrow keys to scroll one line at a time. Spacebar to scroll one page at a time. Right down here, 13-bit CF string. A lot of CF strings on this system. That is the next line, 15 strict transport. So this is way more readable for going through large text files if I want. Also has a lot of advanced features. Say I'm trying to search for the phrase content type. Look, there it is. I can also, it highlights it, but I'll show you even cooler ways of doing it. Gives me where I'm at. So that little prompt down there tells me I'm now 14% through this file. Google Chrome pollutes this log. All right, so less is more, as I say. But it is a pager, allowing you to do that. More is also a pager. Check them out if you want, compare it. I'm just saying what has worked for me. It is up to you to determine the tool that is best for you. Echo is very much like cat. Instead of taking a file, we're taking a string. This is a test as a string, and I'm enclosing it in quotes. Echo merely just says, you just gave me some text. Here it is again. Echo is very useful for writing from your little script to a log file. At this stage, we passed stage 1 successfully. The ping succeeded, or something like that. The user connected. Very bottom there, you see what's called a redirection. Oh, I didn't say this, not logs. So here's the message I'm sending. We talked about that. And I'm redirecting it to a log file. Redirection. Echo just, I did put that there. Echo just simply returns text.
Maybe for printing a variable, like an environment variable.
Yes, I do that later as well.
Okay.
Absolutely. It's an excellent way of getting the shell to, what's the word for it? Evaluate, I guess. Evaluate your variable into what it actually means, and then use that in the next command you pipe it to. For example, debug. Oftentimes debug. The script did make it here. The script did not make it here. Don't use that one because that doesn't work. If you get it, something didn't work. Cool. Backticks and variables were already there. Use a backticks. Essentially what they do is they run a program, they run whatever command this is, pwd, first. And then they take whatever output of pwd and they stick that right in there and let this command work with that whole string. So pwd actually is /users/mdef. Saw that earlier. I happen to be sitting in my home directory. So there it goes. So what this turns into is my current working directory is users and mdef. Taking one command, feeding it to the second, and having it string the whole thing together. Backticks are a little complicated. They're incredibly useful. So they are worth looking into.
I think a lot of people are switching from backticks to
$ parents.
$ parents.
Yeah. So you can also use that. Imagine that these backticks were gone. I put a $ here and open parens before pwd, close right after. That would be the exact same thing as backticks. I'd be interested to hear why people are switching.
They're talking about basically decommissioning the backticks,
Okay.
where they won't do what you're doing now. They'll just be
Plain text.
So yeah,
Yeah.
I think backticks are definitely at least going to be batch.
Don't do this then, folks. Use this man's recommendation. That's excellent.
Still works in Mac, but the newest bash that's
Yes,
in
but, you know,
Linux.
deprecated could mean like
This is sad to me.
Yeah.
Why?
That's little
Yes, that's another good point. Things on the command line have been around for 30 years. They don't move quite so fast.
You can nest
They're very good.
you can nest the dollars on.
Yes, you can. Yes, that's an excellent point because you can't really nest backticks because they'll cancel each other out. It's a very good point. Thank you.
Is this considered interpolation? Like what the backticks did?
That might be the word for it. I don't really know. You're probably right.
I was just wondering. I'm not trying to like drop fancy words, but I just,
In terms
maybe
of
I am.
variables,
Yes.
it's called- in terms of variables, it's called expand your variable to whatever. Right. Probably is different than backticks. You're probably right. So variables up there real quick. This is me using the equal sign to set a variable called my variable string TEST. Having that equal sign right there, the two things next to each other without spaces, is an assignation, assigning this value to this variable. And I separated it out, the shell would have tried to do some sort of math, or actually it failed because you do math differently. But important is no spaces between. And then I'm just echoing, we've all seen echoing, I'm echoing the variable. Variable is preceded by a $sign to indicate that it's not really my variable. I want you to print this exact text. I want you to figure out what this means. You give it back to me. You notice how I don't use the $sign for the first instance of the variable. Variable is oftentimes instantiated in various programming languages, where you have to say like, Perl, it's my variable equals whatever. If it's a local variable, if it's a global. You don't have to instantiate it like that. You do have to give it a value. Like that. Also incredibly useful in scripts. Okay, real quick. Set. So this is all still working with text. What's the time? Okay, so I'm, 20, all right, that's fine. So we're working with text, which is again what we do most of the time. I'm echoing some text, piping it to sed. So sed is already fed with this string, and it acts upon it using the following pattern. So we're going to talk about patterns and matches for the next couple of slides. What I'm telling sed to do is very simple, though it looks really weird. The S and the G, essentially S is the replace function, G is the global function. I'm only going to talk about sed with the S function. It can do a bazillion things. G global means change every instance that you see. This is a find and replace function. That's all it is. And the find is the first thing between slashes, and the replace is the second. So I'm finding every instance of A, replacing it with another. This is another test. Here it is. That's all it said did. You do need to quote. Actually, you don't need to quote that. Best practice, I generally do, because sometimes I have values in there that I don't want to expand in space. Here I do it again. I'm feeding it a different thing. That is a test. There is an A both here and here. I told it to do a global replacement, so I get this gibberish. It does exactly what I tell it to do, which every command on command line does. I look the right thing. But it wouldn't have hurt anything had I not. So I'm echoing another string. Here I'm doing something slightly different. More work for more pay has more in it twice, but I only want the first most one. I indicate that with this caret icon. So putting that right before tells sed only to match an instance of more. It starts a line. Technically, it starts whatever the delimiter is for sed. I'll talk about delimiters in a second.
What do you want the second?
The second more?
Yeah.
I'd probably do something like space more space, because that would not match the first one. I could even just do space more. Any questions? All right, it's pretty self-explanatory. So that caret is a tiny little piece of what we refer to as regular expressions, which is a way of matching things using characters that represent other things. Not as vague as it could possibly get, but I'll give you an example that won't be quite so vague. Real-world example of sed. So we've got a net app at Wharton. It gives us some information. It's aggregates and its volumes. This actually is generated by a different script. And I need to do something very special to it so that the output does not get eaten in exchange. Exchange tends to take any Windows-based carriage returns, which are represented by the \R character, and take my nice little formulated output and turn it into a worthless attachment, reject it. So it is up to me to strip that out of the result and then to eventually feed it. So all I'm doing here is stripping out /r's and replacing it with nothing. Put the two delimiters right here with nothing in between them, so it just deletes it. And then it redirects it to this particular file. This file is a variable that I defined above. The variable value is something like /var, /log, /whatever. But you can use these variables anyway. It's crazy. It's crazy. What's different about set here? That's not the set I just showed you.
That makes sense.
Instead of slashes, you can use basically any delimiter you want in set. The reason why I generally default to percents, a lot of people default to pipes or semicolons. I default to percents because I do a lot of work with file paths. And file paths have slashes in them already. This was to be something that had a lot of, that's a backslash. Forward slashes, SED would interpret each instance of the forward slash as a delimiter between which to act. This means that I can stick a file path there and SED will respect it. I think I have an example of that coming. Grep is probably where I should have started because it's one of the more useful commands available on the command line. It's your command F. For anything you feed it, it will search, find what you're looking for. So say I've got this really, really long file called test. I promise you I've typed out this many numbers in sequence in my file. I did message them. It's like 6 lines long. But say this was a really long file that had some sort of key and value pairing. So some numbering and some text. And I just do not want to page through all of this. Although I could tailor it, I'll just read the last line. What I'm doing is I'm grepping for a known value in the file. So grep pattern match. I'm looking for this really long string in the file test. And it returns, here it is. And it gives me the entire line. Grep by default will return an entire line that matches any piece of what you search. So if I searched for 0, an awful lot of these initial zeros. So I match every line that matches the search. Here I'm doing 2 different flags to grep to slightly change how it works. I meaning that it is case insensitive. I can have capital P permission denied, capital D, all caps, case insensitive, and C counts. Instead of printing back the line here, C just tells me how many instances it found match the pattern. 9. So I should call it this log. Real world example. Paired with PS all the time. Use chronolog. So we have an Apache server that runs this extra little log thing. It does some interesting things. This Apache server runs 547 processes as of this afternoon when I got this out there. So I'm not paging through all of them. I happen to know I'm only interested in chronolog. I want to know what logs it's outputting. So I grep the chronolog. Right here. PSEF is PS is just like activity monitor at the top if you've used it. EF just says I want everybody's processes and full processes. Incredible tool. What you see down here is word count. -L is just line count. So basically, each of these lines is a process. So you can kind of cheat, just get a WCL. Tell me how many processes are in the What's interesting about the grep output? I have 4 instances of chronolog running, another line of grep will find itself because it matches the pattern I fed to grep. That pattern being chronolog. The command it's running there to find chronolog is grep chronolog. Chronolog shows up in the grep. So just remember that. It will always be there generally. If you grep for something, you'll find your own grep in the output. If you're doing PS, sorry. If you're grepping anything else, that's whatever. But PS lists all processes, greps the process. Okay, so awk is the last of the text replacement and text manipulation tools I will talk about today. It's probably my favorite. It's pretty cool. So I'm echoing again, really useful for these demos. Just some text. I'm typing it to awk, and I'm telling it to print specific fields. Awk works by field. So in this, there are 4 fields, each separated by a space. Is this a test? So in actuality, this is $1, $2, $3, $4. They're very similar to variables in this regard, but they are specific syntax to awk. How do I know any of this? Read the manual page. So what I'm actually doing is rearranging. This is not the order they originally come in. I'm asking it to print the second, the first, the third, and the fourth, which actually is also the sentence. Here I'm doing something a little different. I'm asking specifically for only the fourth field in the text output I fed. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Wait, punctuation, punctuation. So awk by default uses the space as its delimiter on which to act. It sees a space, it says great, I'm done with field 1, on to field 2. Another space, on to field 3. So that's what's going up here. This is nicely delimited. This has some stuff in it. It still only acts on spaces. So the comment is part of field number 4. If I was to do field number 6, I'd also get the question. You can, of course, set that delimiter whatever you want it to be. I do that here. I change the delimiter to be this comma. Therefore, there are only 2 fields in text I fed it to if it understands that the delimiter is a comma. What is a delimiter? You ask. So indeed, there it is. It doesn't print the delimiter because it uses that as a control character. This isn't text. This tells me I need to move on to the next field. So awk is very useful.
Andrew, what uses $0? For some reason, I was thinking that awk uses $0 as the first field, and I think I'm crossing it with
$0 prints the whole thing.
It's also in bash. There are a couple built-ins.
In awk, $0 will print the whole thing.
The whole line?
Yes.
Cool to know.
So also for anybody who's interested in awk, Jesse did a advanced awk talk 2 months ago, or December meeting. So the
Great.
slides for
Skip
that,
this.
the slides for that are online.
Cool.
Yep.
Video for something. I was using for
Pearl,
awk,
that's what
$0.
you said? Get out.
That's what Connor would
well,
say.
if you're
It's a text processing.
you're doing extra things in awk, you may be able to like string them up. Because as Jesse's taught, he was talking about how the awk is itself programming conditionals and things like that. So you can do a lot of things in awk. Most of us aren't very special. But anyway, so shout out to Jesse.
Cool.
You can keep it.
Awk is fantastic. We will often be using these text manipulation programs to get awk, sed, graph, echo, cat. Oftentimes we have pipes passing this information. So here's my computer's internet configuration for EN0, which is Wi-Fi. So point to particular IP address. I would like to do awk to do something interesting with it. I'm actually doing 2 things with it. All I'm doing right here, getting this output, which is the same as here. I only want the line that has iNet in it. We'll cheat to get the IP address. So at this point, I have this line, iNet 172. I don't know. Say I'm in a situation. Here, actually, it's perfect. We have 2 networks at work, lots of them. So for purposes of this, we have 2. And we try and keep them in sync in terms of their IP addresses. The 3rd octet is different, but the last final IP address, the 4th octet, is the same across these networks. So if I have 2 hosts, if I have 1 host, this would be interface 1, this would be interface 2. Differ only on the 3rd octet. Since I know that, I'd like to write a little script that helps me determine what's its other subnet IP from an existing. This would help in the deployment scenario. We use Kickstart for Linux machines, so this would be in there, for example. What I'm telling you to do is print the 2nd field of this line, which is the IP address. So at this point, awk, by default, the delimiter is a space. So it determines state, field 1, field 2. And then I'm telling awk to switch. I want its delimiter to be a period. Every time it sees a period, another field, another field. So that's what it's doing here. I'm now printing some straight text. This isn't input from anything else. This is just whatever I put right in here, in quotes. So I'm actually giving it the start of the IP address I'm looking for. And then I'm appending the 4th field. And that goes over this. What's the 4th field? Well, right now we're looking at just that. And if space is in the delimiter, the 4th field is 100. So it's taking my raw text from here and appending the 4th field of 100. And indeed, there it comes out as the IP address I'm trying to create. I'm parsing the IP address. So awk is very, very powerful.
Just another interjection. So there's always the the average faction that says no grep before awk.
The grep before awk. He's probably right.
So
And no red knock twice.
What?
Because it's its own language, so you can
Right.
write it inside.
you can do everything inside of it. So
But demonstration purposes. However, don't demonstrate something that's slightly incorrect because people will use it and do it incorrect. So it's
Alistair's very yes,
Good.
Alistair's very passionate about that. So
very good. We talked just a little bit about regular expressions. Here's the simplest one: the asterisk, stars. So this just simply also is a showcase for the command find, which is way better than Spotlight. Don't use Spotlight. You can do whatever you want. I just don't have the time or patience for Spotlight. I grew up with it in 10.5, so I learned to hate it before I had a chance to improve it. So I just use find. And so this find command, real quick, simply says find in this directory names, so file names, that have .sh in them and any number of crap before them. So I'm using the regular expression star to indicate any match, but it has a .sh. And here's the four URLs. It's a regular expression. But regular expressions are way more complicated than that. Does anyone recognize I printed exactly what it does? This is the code to determine if an IP address passed to it is correct, if it's IP default compatible, or if it's gibberish, 999.999.999 won't get you anywhere. So this parses through. It's a lot of crap, but if you start to take a look at it, you kind of see that it really is just match some numbers, a period, some numbers, a period, some numbers, a period, some numbers, a period. Match 4 octets with some numbers in there. And these numbers are a way of indicating I want you to match specific combinations. So this up here actually says exactly 2, 5, and then any number between 1 and 5. So 255, for example. That type is an or match this number, or whatever. It's essentially a way of just saying, if I do enough of these together, I'll be sure that whatever number gets out of here is actually here. So this is long and complicated. This is regular expressions. Let's do something a little bit more sensible. So I think I actually showed this before. This is a document of 5 paragraphs of the lorem ipsum spam websites. I'm just reading through it. I'm looking for sed, which happens to be the name of the program we just talked about, but is also Latin for but, with 1 T. Grep here is going to match capital S, here, which is very specific, as opposed to lowercase s. So I'm just counting again. There are 3 instances of sed with a capital S. I could have used I with grep, and I would have seen all 6 of them. There have to be 6. Here instead, I'm prepending sed with a caret, which says I really only want lines that start with capital S sed. There is indeed only one, and it is somewhere there. So I do mention capital S, great. So I'm telling it I want to match one that starts a line. And here's how I would end a line with the word. There are 4 of these words in that text. There's 1 with a period that ends a line. And what's this do? Put a backslash there for the period, because the period is actually a control character that is interpreted by grep. Period means any character in a regular expression. If I was to search for ... I would get all 4 character names with text. So in actuality, because there's only 1, and it has a period, these are going to be the same result. But if I had something that was LITX, this would match that. This would not. I'm escaping the period here to tell the shell, I don't want this to be just any character, I want it to be an actual period. And it is respecting that, telling me this here has a period at the end of it, and therefore, and also ends a line. So you saw a couple of examples of redirection. Redirection is how I was writing to log files earlier. Here, I'm using a single caret. What are these called? I don't even know what it's called.
It's an arrow.
Caret. Yeah. Using 1 to send it to this particular file. Open bracket, I guess. Open tab. Open tab.
Actually, that looks like a closed tab.
Yeah, well, it would be a close tab. You can use the redirection. So I'm just echoing out some text into this file. You should do it twice. You see it's slightly different. Write this to a file, please, and now this as well. You see, actually, the second time I did it, I erased the first time I did it and wrote brand new the second line. When I cat it, I only see the second line. The first line is gone. If you use a single arrow bracket tag thing redirect, you overwrite the contents of the file with your new writing. So that second echo erases and overwrites the first one. That's if you use one. So probably in most cases, you'll be using two. So you can see actually both the first and the second line are still in this file. I use the same command up here. So this is how you append to a log file rather than erase your log file. Use two, unless you're sure you want to use one. In many cases, you do. But this is most commonly used for log files. And it will always append to the end of whatever file you're writing to, never at the beginning. If you can maybe set that, change that, I'm not sure. But I've only ever written to the end of the file, and this is how to do it. Real quick on permissions. Someone could stand here for 7 hours and talk about permissions. On OS 10, on Linux, on Unix, on any Unix-based system, probably some other things. POSIX and ACL, so you have two different types of permissions. Like POSIX probably, RWX, there it is, on the left. There are no ACLs in this directory. ACLs are a little bit out of scope of this, but ACLs are more granular than POSIX, allowing you to specify that users cannot delete certain things if they, things like that. POSIX is just read, write, execute, done. And here they are, read, write, execute, and they're in threes. Ignore the D, the D just means directory. But the first three are WX is for the user, next is the group, third is others or everyone, just as it sounds. The user here is andf, me, the group is wheel, others is anyone not in that list. If the user didn't match andf, if the user's group membership did not include wheel, they are part of the other category, or everyone category. So they would get read and execute permissions for this directory. What does that mean? Read and write are exactly as they sound. Execute is interesting. If a file is executable, it can be run as a script. If a directory or folder is executable, it can be traversed. So I can step into it and look around. So in this, absolutely everyone who comes to the system can look through these three folders because X is available for all others. Yeah, that's it. It's really that simple. There's lots of things you can do. Shown in Gmon are ways you can set configure permissions. So here, I have two directories, and I give Charles ownership of the firstmost one. Actually, both of them. I use Gmod to specify those permissions that he gets on the directory. Gmod can take a variety of parameters. Give it, I don't use that here. You might be more familiar with U plus X to give users execute permissions. You can also use, these are called file system modes. Something else. But you can use numbers to represent it. In this case, it's just addition. So for the first three, you see this is 3 digits. It's always 3 digits. This is for user. Read is 4. Write is 1. Write is 2. Execute is 1. So I'm actually, you got all of that up. It's 3, 2, 5, 6, 7. So I'm actually giving the user read, write, and execute permissions. And I'm giving the group none. And others, none. You actually see that right here. So Gmod has restricted this to be accessible. Test 3.2 is accessible only to Charles, not even to other members of the wheel group, which is the rest. So cool stuff. If I was to set Gmod to 777, it would be freely accessible to everyone. This is 755. 755 is pretty common. When you do repair permissions from disk utility, this is actually what it's doing. It's messing with this stuff because it has proof of what that directory had originally when it shipped with the OS, or when you installed the package. It's that receipts. Yes. Cool. There's a million things you can do with user management beyond the scope of this. But a couple common ones. ID will give you information about your currently logged in user, or feed it another user if you want to get information about them. Last, let's demo some of these. These are great. We did test on this system. Yeah, so last is a list of all user logins and restarts and shutdowns on the system for a very long time. Yeah, well, I open up a lot of sessions. That's actually what this is presenting. So it was a busy day on the 21st, whatever. If this is a multi-user system, you can see lots of user accounts over here. So yeah, I can't get out here on SSH. I could demo some of the cool things back at work.
Does Unix have W?
Yes. Unix does. I think OS 10 does too.
Okay, cool.
W is currently logged in users. You can also use the command, everybody's favorite, finger. So there are 2 of me. Here we are. We're hanging out. Guys, big guy. It just means I have 2 sessions open to the system simultaneously. And you can even see where I'm connecting from the console. So yeah, cool stuff. Password. That's just what it sounds like. Change the password. If you are connected to an LDAP system, Open Directory or Active Directory, this will not change your password. This changes Etsy password values. So in most cases, this is useless, but it's important to know this was a big deal 10 years ago. And it still works on Unix systems that aren't LDAPified, which isn't most of them. Most things have central account management now. So I will not actually change my password, but that's how to do it. And DSCL. Anyone remember that? Yeah, absolutely. Back when we had to administer Mac OS 10 servers, DSCL was how we would do a lot of that management work for Workgroup Manager and for user management.
It also works if you connect it to Active Directory.
Yes, I believe it does. In fact, I would be able to see it here. So I'm not connected to any sort of Active Directory LDAP, but DSCL brings me into this interactive mode, which is really cool for programming. It presents my available authentication domains. Local is all I've got on this, but it would say LDAP, it would say AD, and it would give me a little bit of an indicator where those were located. So for example, I could cd to local. Oops, this isn't the command line, or this isn't the command line within this command, so I have to respect its needs. It tells me what specifically I'm supposed to be typing in its man page. CD default. Okay, cool. So I can see some of the things here. I can go into users. And then I can go into NDEF. It's actually, I think I want to do this. Yeah. So that's my picture right there. There's my profile picture you see right there. But then some of the other information. Again, my iCloud username. That's great. Clear. Hey, we all learned that command, right? Excellent. Cool. So really, really useful. Used to be even more useful when we ran OD servers. Anyone still run an OD server? Yeah. Good for you.
At home.
Of course you do it. Of course you do. That's great.
Disco can also write too. Just if
Yes.
you're connected to
DSCL can. Yes. Be careful with your syntax.
Oh, yeah.
Yes. So I think I touched on most of this. Who am I? It's very similar to W or who. Let's see what I'm doing. Yes. So test 4.3 is owned by root. I'm NDEF. Again, the prompt does show my current root. So I can't actually do this. I'm permission denied when I do this. So that doesn't thwart me. I'm in the sudoers file. So I move this for pending sudo. Sudo allows me to assume root permissions for a single program execution, as I do here. So essentially, I'm root. Root just that one command. As soon as I'm done here, back down here, this command is not executed as root, it is executed as me. So on Linux systems, you have to be in the etc sudoers file, and you have to be given specific permissions, or just apparently all permissions, depending. On OS 10, I think you just have to enable the root user. Does that sound about right? No?
You have to be in the admin.
I'm sorry. You know what? That is up. If you're an admin user on your Mac, you can sue. Absolutely. Or if you do have a root user, you could just sudo root. Yeah. So now I'm sitting as root. So this will actually still show the user logged in, not if I'm root. So ID is the way to show that. You can see user ID 0. User ID 0 is root. So I can now do anything. I can freely rm-rf everything. And let's close that. So here's a good example. I have sudo to root, so I'm the user, not myself. I would like to log out as root. Command D, or sorry, Control D, will return me to my own user. So Control D is to log out. Very cool stuff.
A shortcut is if you type a command and you need sudo permissions, you can just do sudo bang bang.
Yes. Bangs are exclamation points. You do sudo double exclamation point, will run the previous command you ran, the very previous one, with whatever you typed in right before those double bangs. So be careful, because if your previous command you ran was rm-rf, as I started to do that, and you didn't remember doing that, you will sudo delete everything. I have actually seen something not quite so terrible, but very similar happen. I don't use that command because of it, but it's a time saver if you're very smart and remember everything you've done.
I think he brought that up now. Let's test you.
Oh,
See if you demo it.
I see. Grr. I think that's exactly what you did.
Right? Say, you haven't lived until you've rm-rf directory that you use at least once.
Another shortcut with the bang bang is if you do bang-2, it's not your previous command, but the one before that.
Oh, excellent.
And you just keep doing that. Or if you keep a history like he had earlier, you can actually do bang and then that number.
You can specify the number. So
and
I
then it'll
should be able
go
to do,
run that command.
524,
Bang.
like so. Exactly.
There you go.
We ran that clear command. Excellent. Good point.
$9 signs good too.
For what?
Well, that's the parameters of the last command.
Yes. Previous
So the kind
return.
of path that you were specifying for the last command, you use the same
Yes.
path on.
I wouldn't have to type that whole path again.
Or you could do, I like better ESC period.
ESC period. What's that?
It's the last argument from the last command.
Okay, so I could do something like echo. Maybe like that. No, interesting.
It's really useful, actually. I couldn't live without it.
Okay, thank you.
Yep.
Cool. So the environment. When you're in a shell, there's lots of stuff that's already set for you as soon as you log in. Download that in a second. The environment is basically a collection of variables, mostly variables, in fact, that are already set. So we can see things like what's important. Path. That is very important. I'll talk about path in a second. PWD is where I'm at. So this is actually part of the environment, the present working directory. My shell is right in there. The terminal I prefer. If I connect to lots of different systems that have different graphical capabilities, not even graphical, different terminal console emulation capabilities. This is set for my default terminal. The actual environment is a lot larger than that. It is all of these variables. It's not that large, but on some of our Linux systems back at Wharton, it is incredibly large. Cool, so back when I had SSH access off of this device, I was able to SSH into one of our systems. You can see that as soon as I get in there, the very first thing I do is echo this variable. I did not set this in advance. It's right here. It's already defined in my environment. As I log in, I get all of that already. So again, shells are all about saving time. Programs, yeah, that's fine. So what actually sets all that up? A lot of it's default. You can configure a lot of that yourself. This is my bash RC file in my home directory, right there. It'll source this file if it exists. In my home directory, it does not. Although you can see a nice little if statement. This gives me the prompt. So when I have a system open, you can see it right up there. Mod VLAN 502 is the host name of the system. Wireless network. Followed by the working directory, followed by the presently logged in user, followed by a $sign indicating a non-admin user, or a £sign indicating an admin user. On Linux, it's not admin standard, it's just standard. That prompt is actually defined by this junk. So you can do lots of cool things here. Colorize it, for example, or whatnot. You would be changing this there. But here's what's interesting. I put 2 aliases in here to 2 of my most commonly accessed systems. So I merely need to type Lambo or Janus to take me to those 2 systems. To any of you admins from Springboard, you might recognize this particular port. we always use to obfuscate access lines. Text editors are how we change text. Really simple. Like you open up Word or text edit, on the command line you would be using one of these three things. Or actually there are hundreds of them. There's editors, whatever. But Nano, Emacs, and VI are the three most common. VI is a version of Vim, which is very common. Nano is sometimes referred to as Pico. Box or other older devices. Let's use Nano as an example. These are the most common commands. Breeze through this, you can read it. Give you a quick example of what that looks like though. So let's, oh, I'm in the logs directory. Cool, well, let's Nano weekly out. So I'm in this text file and I'm deleting lines. I'm adding stuff. I'm paging up and down. Let's see, I am searching for the text re. There it is. How about again? How about again? I am outputting this file. Do I want to save it? No. And I'm quitting. No save. So same functionality as Word graphics program, but these editors are different. So some people swear by VI, some Emacs, they're insane. And some people like me just use little old Nano and really don't live up to our full potential, I'm sure. I'll learn VI at some point, I promise.
VI is a lot more powerful. You can delete line by line. You can also search and delete. They've proven that it can be used as its own like word processing language, where you can type a whole command and it will do everything for you.
Excellent.
I'll plug it a little bit too. If you want to learn VI, like I'd say Vim Tutor is a quick 20-minute way. You know, just it'll run you through and gives you everything you possibly need. Or Vim Adventures, which is like a cheap game. It's kind of like Zelda, but not as cool. And but it's a lot of fun, and you'll learn it really well, but just by playing the game.
Fantastic.
Vim Adventures.
What are you doing over there, Andrew?
It's fine. You would, I know
you
you'd
work. Playing this game, that's where I'm learning.
Actually got work to pay for that.
Oh, you guys hired me? Shell scripting is putting all of this together. A lot of little commands I can run at the command line to do little things. In reality, we most of the time use these commands in shell scripts to accomplish things in succession and then come out with our final output. Parsing log files or generating files to do whatever. Generating emails. So this is the bare minimum for a shell script. It starts with what's called the shebang. Original bang, the exclamation point bang. Single bang, I'm sorry, comment, or hash bang, and then the shell you're using. That could be bin Perl, bin Python, user bin Python. That could be KSH, SH. It's very commonly bin SH, in fact. Say that, yeah. For us, we're just going to use bash. I want it to use the bash shell when it runs, so it has the environment variables from bash and it has whatever else. So I'm starting there. All shell scripts need to begin with this shebang. Whatever's here is the shell that runs it, but it needs to have a shebang. It should also have a comment. Right off the bat, tell the user what this does. Chances are a user's not going to use it or read it. If you are, 10 years down the line, you forgot what it does. So try and remember that. There it is. Exit's a command. You can give it an exit status as well. 0, 1, whatnot, failure, success.
0 is success, 1 is usually error condition. So you can also set up different exit refers.
You can to give an indicator of what actually happened.
Right. Again, more mainly for yourself. So exit. So script blows up and it says exit 8. You would go, oh, I know what exit 8. So you go back and look at the script and exit 8. Right. And you know where. The other thing is, like, you can write a shell script with just bang bin sh. And it'll work on the Macs, especially since we're all Mac, mostly Mac admins here. But you probably should use Bash because there are more features available for Bash, and Bash is built into the system as usually default. Whereas as SH is really, if you're doing SH, you're looking to do things as possibly compliant, so the script can be essentially ported to another Unix type system. So if you can write it as SH if you're using a script that you want to run on multiple Unix-based systems like OS X or Red Hat or BSD. But if you're just doing Macs, you just do it straight Bash. And, shouldn't have many issues at all. So.
following on that return code comment, oftentimes those return codes are passed to programs down the line that are expecting code. If I get 8, then I know actually this next program that gets that output does the other option rather than 7 or 6. So return codes are usually in a stack of programs all speaking to each other, but very useful for telling you exactly what if you code for it.
If you want to use those, you can use the ampersand, or pipe characters to take actions based on whether you have success or failure.
Yes, that's actually a really short one-liner for determining if a shell shock. Oh, sorry, real quick. So this script actually does something. Single line, it prints a little bit of text. Here I'm using echo to generate the output in the script. That text has backticks in it. No, you should not use backticks, as we've learned today. I'm just getting it to intersperse the output of ID and the output of hostname into this string. And so it's just what it looks when I actually run it. Oh, it doesn't work because scripts must be executable to run. X permission, here's where it comes into play for the file. I'm denied this, even though I don't show you, even though I own this file. I'm denied the ability to run it because, oh, I do show you. Because it does not have the X option here. If I did not have the X option here, but I did here, members of this group could run it. I'm a member of the group, I could run it X. If it was vice versa, I had the X here and nothing here, I could run it. No group members besides me. So make a script executable if you intend to run it, like so. So I don't necessarily have to use the load 700, 755, or whatnot. I can say user plus an execute permissions. This could be group, this could be everyone, this could be write, this could be read. But I just want to add execute permissions to the user on this file. Done. As you can see, there it is. And when I run it, it now works. It gives me the expected output. It determines from ID F, F gives me the name, as opposed to that long string of group membership and my UID. So it gives me the full name. And then managing 6000 dot local is my host name. Host name gives me that directly. It includes the FQDN. Cool. So this is a little bit of a longer shell script. I forgot to do something with this. I commented at the very beginning. So I do not remember what this does. In fact, I wrote this a year ago, and I don't remember what this does. Otherwise, it is a decent shell script. I think it hits Google with some search parameters. You can see such things as an if statement. It's actually looking to see if I was passed an argument. Your script can take parameters and arguments, just like any command. This nationality, this can take something. This is actually expecting to see a search string, which is how you spell string correctly. And then it's passing it to the end of this. So I'm echoing all of this junk as a string, and then appending it to here. So a bunch of junk, you see some redirection, said, escaping the slash. Just an example. I'm not actually exiting the script either. There's no exit. So this is not a particularly good script, but it's some of the things we've been talking about. Here's a better one with comments. So this is a script that is designed to look through all user home directories on an entire system, all 50,000, to determine if they're missing a certain file. The file is autoexec.sax. So that's what I'm looking for. So I create a variable called gridHome and say it's going to be here, and mount their home directories at this location on this dev system. And then what I'm doing is using a for loop. For loops are awesome. They're a little bit beyond the scope of this. But essentially what I'm telling it to do is I want you to ls this directory, which is going to be a bunch of group directories, user group directories that themselves contain user directories. So this would be a school, like a work. And then grep out this one file. We have one file in there that is not a home directory, just a maintenance file. Get rid of that. And then do. So for every folder in the home directory right now, I'm doing another for loop. So for every user in that particular school's directory, I want to do this if statement. So this all this if statement does says, is that file there? If not, write it. Copying from on Linux, etc scale is where the essentially the skeleton files in a new home directory are located. It's just like creating a new home directory on Mac OS 10 or a new user. It'll bring over a couple configuration files that need to be there for everyone. Like the user library folder, for example, is pre-populated when you create a user account. Same sort of thing. but I'm doing it myself. I'm also I'm echoing without a redirect. This prints right to the command line. So I'm writing this and typing it or whatever, and I hit return. I get this echo and this echo back out at my console as the script runs. So I'm keeping tabs on what the script is doing. I find that to be useful. A lot of people will send these to a file and then tail the file also side by side. Tail-F will print the last line of the file as it comes into the file. So you can watch a log file grow as things happen. Maybe I should have done that here. Then I'd have proof afterwards. I could reference the file rather than I close my browser. Yeah, so that's just transferring things. But really what's important here is variables. Variables are everywhere. I don't want to have to type all this 50 times. Now in a test, we have to go here, 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 here. It's a variable. I use that variable and we're good. Sure. I'm almost done, actually. This is perfect. Oh, the command line standards. 24-hour time, as we see here. 24-hour time means two things, just like military time. It's the 24-hour clock, so we're sitting at 17, 18. Math is not my strong suit, English major. But also it means that the wee hours of the morning are appended by a 0, so prepended. So 315 is 0315. You'll see log files like this, unless they're designed to be user-facing. So console will still look nice and pretty if you use console.app, but everywhere else it's going to be 24 hours. Get used to that, I suppose. And don't use spaces. Look at that file directory right there, test 411. I would have to use a backslash every time I wanted to do something with them. Spaces just generally get in the way of a lot of things. Common programming is to use underscores or hyphens. Your preference. Although you can't get away with it, of course, because Macintosh HD is on all user computers. This is not. It's your default root directory to space right now. So, just something to keep in mind. Case sensitivity, we talked about this mostly. But here I'm setting this lovely word to a file test, another file test with different cases. And if I look, there's only the one file. OS10 is case insensitive. So it treats this the same file. I have to do grep. Yeah, grep with capital S twice, lowercase s, not there. Commands are case sensitive. If I use I for case insensitivity, it does fine. Everybody remember shell shock? Shell is a program, collection of programs, just as vulnerable as any program you may install via Casper to your end users that should be patched. So keep your shell patched too. We demoed the semicolon, that's right. Okay, cool. So things that are really awesome that will make working in the command line a little easier. iTerm 2, which is what I've been using for this demo, which is right here. I recommend this because, terminal's fine for getting started. It's free, actively developed. They just patched it a couple weeks ago. It's fantastic. We'll keep working on it. Has these features. I like it primarily because it logs everything I do. Show you this. So if I was to go into documents and then console sessions, how many files do I have in here? 9,400. Each of these is a log from the session I had in iTerm working with a system. So somewhere in here is the host name and whatnot, a million systems. So you tell I had a busy day. Say 18. Wow. Oh, cool. Some of these are crazy. Logging everything I've done. So I can go back and look. Let's cap that last one. 2016, tab completion, tab completion, tab completion. 18.5. 8 should be enough. No, 2.6. Yeah, there we go. So nothing happened to this. We logged it. They're on the cheat, and we're going to look at the first couple of this one. Let's only head 50 lines of this. Thank you. Oh, cool. So I was, what was I trying to do? Permission denied. I was doing find. I was doing it very wrong. So I was actually finding everything. So I misused the command, but here's an output of what it did. I closed the window already. It's gone. I don't remember what I did, but I can come back in here and read it. It's good. Really why this is useful is because I can grep for that thing I really need. In every log file, will find it for me and return it for me. Having that is phenomenal because I don't remember every command I've done, but my computer does for me because it logs each console session. It's an iTurn2 feature that I love. You can set up profiles like a lot of different apps. Between them, you have the windows set just the right way, color, transparency, whatnot. So it's and fun. Some people do that for different systems. So these are my Unix systems. They're red background, red hat. This is the Solaris system. It's a white back. Searching, you can actually search right in. And it's even prettier than built-in searches elsewhere. So if I'm looking particularly for account, I'll highlight every instance of that. It is case insensitive by default. I can turn on regular expressions and search for something. Oh, maybe I want to do something that is A N star F, or AND F and AMF. And the searching functionality is quite excellent. Obviously, that's a poor example, is it not? But you can see how that utility would be useful. Window management, things like split, side-by-side working, like so. And now that I can see this and scroll through it, I can independently do something else. Just really any number of things. Tab is what most people like. I can't get there, can I? So here, and then a new tab. If you go to a different system, these will generally show the system you're in, which is incredibly useful. You can also do tabs on the left-hand side. It's really user preference, whatever you prefer. But that functionality is there. There's a password manager. You can search across all active sessions. You can restore accidentally closed sessions. If you can close a window, you're still connected, you're still using it. iTurn actually doesn't cancel out of that until 5 seconds by default. You can change that. Useful if you're in the middle of something big. You turn around and you accidentally hit Command Q instead of Command M for minimizing. Who knows what you do? You can get right back in there. You can annotate your scroll back history after you present your proof of what you've done to a client, for example. So people do that. I'm of the opinion that clients do not need to know anything like that. We shouldn't do that. But it's good to remind yourself of things done or such. Again, just features that are super cool. They're up to you. Another one that's very common in the industry is sublime text. This is more of a let me show you it's cool. And I'm just going to do this. So you can do color coding in VI, for example. You can do lots of things this has. This is a GUI implementation that lets you work on shell scripts or programming files, or even read log files. And have lots of different features for working with. Really, it's an automator of tasks. It's a time saver. So some people love it. I kind of like working directly on the file system in an editor, built-in editor. But this is very nice for developers.
Plug Atom is something similar.
Yeah. ATOM.
ATOM is
Cool.
Yeah.
Cool.
If you do a lot of shell scripting, one of the good things about Atom is you can add a plugin that'll lint your shell. So basically tell you when you've done something wrong as you're writing it. So also you can in Atom you can add another plugin where you can run the command, run the script, which doesn't always work because you need root privileges for some of these scripts, but you can at least test the command if you need to test it.
Text Wrangler has some similar features.
Yep, absolutely. Text Wrangler has also been around for a long time.
Yes.
So if you've grown used to it the past 10 years, you're never moving on from it.
Actually, I did switch from Text Wrangler to Atom.
Data, really? Yes. That's how good it is. No?
I bounce back and forth,
Okay, basically on what's required of the task.
or whatever I feel like.
Cool. BB Edit does a pretty good job of some of these things too.
Yep.
Built-in like SFTP stuff. I used to use for web design. PHP. Yeah, same deal. So it's really the task at hand, the tool available in that show. So that's it. Thanks everybody. There's a ton of stuff that we can all talk about if this was at all interesting to you. Next time I would like to talk about these things. Networking specifically is my favorite. We got to start somewhere, so this is more of like an introduction. I didn't know there was previously one tutorial.
Yes. Yeah, originally it would have followed naturally after yours, but timing and scheduling is. So
I think this stuff is fun. I'd love to talk about it. And thanks, everyone.
It is now 8 o'clock, so we kind of have to. We don't have to leave right now, but they're going to kick us out shortly.